Hey everyone, Ryzen here, and welcome to the review for Odin Sphere. And I'm going to be running solo on this one because it wasn't a co-op LP. And like before, my laptop is over here. So, let's just get right to it. So Odin Sphere was a game that I got for Christmas one year. I forget exactly the year I got it, but I ended up getting it together with Final Fantasy XII and a few other games. I think one of them was a Dragon Ball Z game. I forget, maybe one of the Tenkaichis. I don't think it was a Budokai. I don't remember though. But anyway, the only game that I really liked out of the 5 games I got was Odin Sphere. I didn't even like Final Fantasy XII. I actually hated Final Fantasy XII. I thought it was boring and repetitive and tedious. And the game played itself, but I've kind of changed my tune on that. I actually really like Final Fantasy XII now. Kind of weird, but Odin Sphere I liked so much that I actually put Final Fantasy XII down and then played Odin Sphere. And I beat it twice in a row. And that just doesn't usually happen. Usually I'll beat a game once if at all right away. Especially now that I do these Let's Plays and they take up a lot of time and I do so much preparations for them. But even back then I would typically pick up a game, get significant progress through it, and then kind of lose interest about halfway through and end up picking up another game and then later on going back and finishing it. But Odin Sphere I just finished right away. So I really liked it. I don't know, I just liked I felt challenging without being too unfair, and I love the sense of reward and the progression of power you got for being prepared for various situations with the item system, and the combat system was fluid, and the game just looks fantastic. And speaking of looking good, let's talk a little bit about the graphics. And really, there's not much to say because it looks damn good. Everything about the graphics is hand-drawn. The enemy sprites, the character sprites, the backgrounds, the spell animations are amazing. The item effects are awesome. The bosses, especially some of the larger ones, just look fantastic. Like the Darkova, King Galen, Onyx, or Odin. The characters look great, even the supporting characters. Not a big fan of how they palette swap like King Valentine and the Wise Men, but I forgive it because the game just looks amazing. To me, it's the most visually appealing game I own. And really the most visually appealing game I've ever played or seen. It's just beautiful. It's like a work of art in motion. It's awesome. I love it. So, there's no question. I gotta give the graphics a 10 out of 10. On art design alone, it's a 10 out of 10. Just an excellent job with that. As for the music of the game, it's very well composed. It's not the greatest soundtrack ever. It's not Chrono Trigger. It's not, a lot of the Final Fantasy soundtracks, but it's very good. It's very well composed, and a lot of the tracks that they use are appropriate for the situations and really add to the cutscenes. And the battle theme is okay, especially the final boss theme for each character chapter. That's just unbelievably epic. That's one of the best themes in the game. And then you have the theme that plays like when Mercedes dies and or whenever really anything tragic happens, it just really adds to the scene. Or like when Cornelius confronts King Valentine. Part of what makes that scene so awesome is the music they use. And, the only real fault I have with it is that it's not as consistent as like Chrono Trigger. There are a couple songs there that are just okay. There's nothing really bad about it, and the songs that are really good are really good. So I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. As for the plot, well, it's extremely well written. It's one of the best written plots in a video game. The characters are extremely well developed. All 5 characters really feel different at the beginning of their stories than they do at the end. Even a lot of the side characters actually feel relevant to the game, like Miras and her relationship with Gwendolyn, or Braum, especially Braum with his guilty conscience over what he did to Oswald. And he actually develops as a character. And of course you have the fantastic villain presence, King Valentine. I mean, he's just such an effective villain, really makes you hate the guy. Unfortunately, he doesn't get enough screen time, and they wait way too long to introduce any sort of major villain. I mean, really, King Valentine doesn't come into the plot until the 2nd book, and he doesn't even show up that much there. And then he takes a break in Oswald's book. But, you know, his voice acting is unbelievably epic, unless you have it on Japanese voice acting, and then I don't know why, but his Japanese voice actor is terrible with like no emotion. That really pissed me off when I found that out. But yeah, his voice acting is incredible. The voice acting in general is incredible. You know, just great voice acting and great voice direction. Except for when they're clearly trying to force a different voice for some minor characters that you talk to. But other than that, it's great all around. Very ambitious plot. Oh, and the game even made me care for the random paladin in Mercedes' story, who actually you can talk to, and you get a sense of his loyalty, and then you have to see him die at the end of the plot, and it's like, what the hell? I mean, how many games can make you care for a random NPC that you just talk to? That's pretty impressive. But anyway, the plot's very ambitiously told with 5 stories happening concurrently. And there are a couple of issues with the timeline being kind of weird. The one that jumps to mind is Mercedes leaves to go find Beldor before Oswald, yet Oswald gets there first. That doesn't really make any sense. And there are a couple of awkward gaps in the plot, but I'd much rather have those awkward gaps that we've already seen instead of just seeing them from a different perspective. It helps avoid repetition. There are some plot holes, not too many. Really the big one is the Ring of Tetrel, where King Valentine is going after the Ring of Tetrel while the cauldron is still activated, and later it's revealed he can just use the cauldron at will. Logically, it makes more sense for him to just go straight after the cauldron, just use it right away, boom, in the world, his plan succeeds. Going after the Ring of Tetrel is just needlessly delaying him for no reason. And in fact, he was pretty much right there. He was where the cauldron was. He knew where it was. It just doesn't make any sense why he wouldn't just immediately go to activate the cauldron. I'm assuming they wrote themselves into a corner and just said, screw it, we can't figure out how to get him the Ring of Tetrel, and then still have things work out in the end, so just let him be able to use the cauldron at will. Which is really stupid. That's a major plot hole. But it is the only major plot hole in the game, so I kind of overlook it. It is bad, though. Beldor is also revived in the plot. He does serve a purpose in controlling Ingwe, but really they could have just had him not die in the first place to do that. Having him come back just to put him in the Netherworld to tell King Gallen how to escape is really illogical when the Halia should just flat out know exactly what Beldor told King Gallen. It's just rather silly that the Halia just don't tell them that, or tell King Gallen that themselves, but that's just a minor thing. And at least Beldor's revived for some purpose with the whole Ingwe thing. However, he's apparently killed off screen. And he's definitely dead. There's no way he actually survives the end of the game because the game outright states that there's only 4 people in the entire world that survive. Beldor is not one of them, so what the hell happened to Beldor? They remember to kill him off or show what he's doing in the wrong paths, but in the correct path, he just disappears. I don't understand that. I don't know how you forget about the villain you just brought back. Don't bring a guy back if you're going to completely forget about him. So that's kind of a big deal. King Valentine is also killed off screen in the true ending, although at least we see his fate in the generic scene, which is what canonically happens to him. That should have been showed in the actual path to the good ending. It's kind of silly to put your main villain dying off screen. The final twist is also kind of silly, where the whole book is historically accurate to the world that the game is set in. The problem with that is who the hell wrote those books? Considering 4 people survived and one of them was not Mercedes, so who the hell would have wrote her book? Because it clearly can't be herself. And she barely had any contact with the other characters. And they certainly wouldn't know everything she did. I mean, there is that bonus scene that tries to, the player wrote the books, but that's really stupid. I mean, that's like saying, oh, the reader is the omniscient narrator. It just doesn't work. It's just a cop-out answer, and frankly, it seems more like a joke scene, so I don't even know how to take it. And that still doesn't make sense because there's only 4 survivors. There is no 5th survivor to write this book, or all these books, so where did they come from? It's just an unneeded twist to a very well-written plot. Just needlessly complicates it, for the sake of having a shocking plot twist at the end. I mean, they kind of wanted a twist ending, without really having a twist ending, which is kind of weird, but it's silly and unneeded. Final issue I have is King Valentine. Clearly unstable. Most characters know this guy is up to something. I mean, Velvet knows exactly what he's up to, but even the characters that don't know he's crazy and have multiple chances to stop him. I mean, Cornelius has chances. Mercedes has a chance to stop him. Velvet has a chance to stop him multiple times. Odin actually has him in his grasp. They try to explain this away, why nobody stops this guy, as, oh, he's immortal and he needs to bring about Armageddon so he can die. Okay, but that still doesn't explain why they don't just put him in jail. I mean, Odin had no problem taking Cornelius captive. Why can't you just take away King Valentine's crown, which is apparently the source of his power, and then throw him in a jail cell? Or better yet, bring him back to the Netherworld. It's really frustrating when protagonists and other characters just let antagonists do whatever they want when they have chances to stop them. It's just simple things that minor changes can account for. You know, have the villain get away of his own volition, of his own power. But it's kind of nitpicking, but it does irritate me. It's in a lot of plots. But there's really only a few gripes I have with the plot. So overall, I am going to give the plot a 9.5 out of 10. It's so well written. There's so many effectively told emotional moments. And just such a likable cast of characters. I mean, I even care for the side characters. And that usually does not happen. And the antagonists are just, they make an effective presence known, clear motives, backstory, particularly for King Valentine, and just overall effective effective storytelling. Alright, let's talk about the gameplay, which is where the game sadly falters at the most important part of the game, but fortunately I do think it's carried by the other aspects of the game, but gameplay has some serious problems, but I'll start with the positives. It discourages button mashing. So if you're the kind of guy that hates button mashing, you're going to like this game because it rewards you for recognizing patterns. I mean, I suppose you could grind your way to victory, but really you're encouraged to recognize patterns or come overall prepared with items and magic spells. And the limited inventory system comes into play to make you take advantage of these powerful items that can really help turn the tide of battle, like napalms that can wipe out entire waves of enemies. Or toxics that can do the same thing. Or killer clouds that can, I think that's the name of one of the items. The one that inflicts curse, which is instant death. Or, let's see, the buffing items. Like painkillers to cut damage in half. Or if you're playing on heroic mode where you can't increase your HP, the spirit items to give you 3 extra hits. Or blizzards to freeze entire groups of enemies. Just so many options with the items. Unlimited POWs to make you not run out of POW. And the POW gauge itself prevents button mashing because you can't just run up to an enemy and mash the square button over and over again because you're going to tire yourself out. Although that can get kind of annoying that you have to constantly pause. But I kind of like the balance it has with having to cool down, but also wanting to get more hits in to build your chain to increase your likelihood of getting a critical hit, which do a lot more damage than a regular hit. But at the same time, you put yourself more at risk of either accidentally running out of POW or just flat out leaving yourself open to attack. So there's a risk reward there. And the magic system is just fantastic in how balanced it is. I mean, you have extremely powerful spells, including, Overload to double your damage, or Cyclone to take out groups of enemies, Phozon Burst for massive damage for all around your character, the useful healing spell between stages. But it's balanced by having really low MP costs. So you really gotta save it for those difficult stages and the boss battles. You can't just spam magic, without any consequence. It's actually a precious resource. So you have to balance your use between magic, items, and physical attacks. Unfortunately, there's really not a whole lot else to the actual combat system itself. The game is very repetitive. You go through the same stages multiple times, doing the same thing against the same enemies, against the same bosses. And the game's 40 hours long. If it was 20 hours long, okay, maybe. But 40, in fact, closer to 50, it's way too long for how repetitive it is. Significantly too long. I mean, bosses are fought at usually 3 times or more. And they're always identical. I don't understand why they didn't change something in the boss's AI script. They did it for the Darkova. I mean, the second fight with the Darkova is clearly different from the first. But they didn't do that for, when you fight Odette multiple times. It's the exact same fight. Same with Odin. Same with General Brigand. Same with Wagner. It gets old. Same with the enemies. They never evolve over the course of the game. Every area has the same exact enemies. For every character, you visit each area at least 4 times. I mean, by the end of the second book, you've gone to every area. and fought almost every boss in the game. It just gets absurd. Cooking is also really abusive. In a matter of minutes, you can drastically increase your HP. You can quadruple it in a matter of minutes. Or you can spend hours grinding and get 2 or 3 levels, which would be the equivalent of maybe 100 HP. If you have a high HP gaining character. Or you can spend the 5 minutes to get several hundred HP increase. They do try to balance that a little bit with the environmental hazards doing more damage to you. But as long as you don't go overboard with it, it's not really going to be that noticeable. The game tries to have a self-balancing difficulty. When you get injured, you plant food, you eat food, you get experience. And for your HP level. You level up your HP level, you get more max HP. So the more you need to heal, the more HP you get to account for the more damage you take. Doesn't work very well in practice because, like I said, cooking is flat out better. But even if cooking wasn't flat out better, the food experience you get quickly becomes negligible. I mean, you would have to eat dozens upon dozens of various fruit just to gain 1 HP level when you can spend a few minutes not only leveling up your HP level by cooking, but also just flat out increasing your max hit points. Because actually eating food at the restaurant increases your max HP without leveling up your HP level, and also gives you experience to level up your HP level. So it doesn't work well at all. The accessories are also a problem too. Almost all of them are useless. They're either way too expensive, or they just have a negligible effect. I mean, 10% increase to your attack power. Negligible. Shield badge. I think it's called the shield badge. Maybe it's the shield ring. Whatever it is, the accessory that cuts damage down. Negligible. Barely noticeable. Increasing your HP. Okay, you can just cook. Protecting yourself against status ailments. Sounds great, but they cost 100 gold, and that is not easy to come by. The only one that's useful is the amulet, and that's only for a couple boss battles because it actually costs a reasonable amount of money. Really, the only accessory worth anything is the Spirit Stone, because it increases your cipher level experience. Well, it increases the amount of experience you get by absorbing the souls of enemies towards leveling up each character's weapon, which in turn adds to your damage. I mean, very late game, yeah, a Jupiter Bangle to increase your attack power by 30%, that's kind of significant. Well, that is significant. But that's in-game stuff. For the vast majority of the time, you're going to use a Spirit Stone. Inventory management, again, can be a constant annoyance where every few minutes, well, probably every 5 to 10 minutes, you have to stop, either fuse stuff away, use up your attacking items, use up your buffing items, healing items, whatever, drop stuff, sell stuff, which is kind of useless because things don't sell for enough in the game. And it really interrupts the flow of the gameplay to constantly be doing this. The frame rate also drops way too much. I mean, I'm talking unplayable levels, especially in the Netherworld, but I've seen it happen elsewhere. And if you watch the Let's Play, you can see it happening, even outside the Netherworld. It drops to such a poor frame rate that it's unplayable. I mean, it gets to a point where your inputs become so delayed that they just stop working at all. And it's just because of the poor frame rate. I mean, it drops to like 10 frames a second. And that's inexcusable for a game released in 2007. I mean, Dynasty Warriors was getting their frame rate issues fixed at this point. I mean, there's just no excuse. I know the PAL version cleaned up the code of the game to make it run better. They just didn't optimize it. from my understanding, which is stupid. I don't have the PAL version, and I'm going by the North American version, which has the frame rate issue. So I can only review the game based on the version of the game I have. And the frame rate drops are inexcusable. I mean, if it dropped down to 20 frames a second, okay, fine, I could bear with it. But 10 or less, it's unplayable. I mean, that should not have gotten through QA. I mean, at the end of the day, the game it's enjoyable. It's definitely a sense of reward for getting through difficult sections of the game, and there is a sense of progression, and you do feel like a badass when you nuke an entire screen of enemies with Phozon Burst, or use those napalms that you fused, but it's still very flawed. So I'm going to give the gameplay 4.5 out of 10. It's enjoyable, but flawed. It's below average. Replay value. Not going to sugarcoat it. There's almost none. You have to just flat out like the game to replay it. And I like the game, so I replay it, but it's not going to encourage you to play it again on its own because there's no side quests. There's the perfect file, which is that last star that I didn't get lit in my Let's Play. But in order to get it, all you have to do is collect all the little texts in the game and see all the cutscenes. And then unlock every cooking recipe. Well, collecting all the text, which contains, the lore of the game, which I forgot to mention during the plot, but there's some interesting stuff in there. About the laws and the economy. The world is quite fleshed out. But you also have the cooking recipes and the alchemy items. Well, you're going to get all of that just by going through every single stage. So, I mean, in all likelihood, you're going to get that just by going through the game. The cutscenes, well, you can just pick up the cat and see which ones you're missing. And the last cutscene that you have to wait on after the credits doesn't count to... I don't think that counts for that. Yeah, I don't think it does. Maybe it does, but that may be the only thing that throws you off if that counts or not. I actually don't know. I don't think it does, though, because I know it doesn't count towards unlocking the bonus scene that you need to get, in order to see, you need to see all the other Armageddon cutscenes. But all those Armageddon cutscenes you're going to probably see anyway, because you're going to want to take the wrong paths after taking the right one, or you'll just accidentally see them. It's not that hard to get without a walkthrough. And yeah, the true ending path might elude you a couple of times, but really the game beats it into your face pretty heavily which character you're supposed to use. I mean, the Cauldron, they outright tell you, use Velvet, and the other ones, they make it blatantly obvious. Like King Gallon, they mention Shadow in there. Gee, I wonder who the Shadow Knight is. For Onyx, they mentioned something about Throne of the Fairies or something like that. I forget the exact clue, but it's just blatantly obvious. For the Darkova, they say the non-human prince. Gee, I wonder who that is. And it's not very subtle, to say the least. So really the only thing that takes a little bit of time is getting the upgraded versions of cooking recipes, which require you to cook other recipes 5 times each, which really doesn't take that much time anyway. If you care to do that, and if you do, you'll just do it the first time through, because the game just tells you what you need, and it's not that hard to get the ingredients. You can buy a lot of them. So, needless to say, the replay value gets a 0 out of 10. There's just no reason to play the game again. The game is challenging without being unfair for the most part. And it's not unforgiving. I mean, if you die, you just restart the stage you're on. And each stage is really short, 1 to 3 waves of enemies. The only real annoyance is the very long load time, which I didn't mention, but yeah, there is a very long load time in the game, which is annoying when you die. Which, upon repeated failures, could get rather frustrating. There is a sense of reward for taking the time to fuse powerful items and then using them to clear a difficult stage, or buffing yourself up to help you beat a difficult boss. And there are only a few random attacks, like Belial dropping stuff on you, or Galen also has an attack where he flings stuff off of his body that's kind of hard to avoid. But for the most part, everything is easily noticeable in a pattern, and if you really practice at the game, you can avoid everything. Except for a couple of random attacks that are total nonsense to be in a game that's supposed to encourage pattern recognition, but that only happens a couple times. Only 2 or 3 times, I think. But the repetition will cause the game to feel like a drag at times. So you may want to play the game in short bursts. But I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10, because, at least for me, when I'm playing it, I have a blast, especially if I'm not overloading on it. Like on the Let's Play, I was playing the game for 10 to 20 minutes a day, and I had a lot of fun doing it that way. But if you were sitting down playing the game for 3 to 4 hours, might not be as enjoyable to you, especially if it's a second or third playthrough where you already know the plot. So I think 8 out of 10 is pretty fair for that. If the repetition really bothers you, you probably go a lot lower than that. But I really had fun with the game. So in conclusion, Odin Sphere's flawed gameplay is carried by its good soundtrack, well, great soundtrack, the awesome graphics and the hand-drawn art, and the well-written plot, well-developed characters, the great antagonists of the game. All of these things just really make up for the lackluster gameplay. And I would recommend it to anyone that dislikes button mashers, likes action games, or enjoys action RPGs, or side-scrollers in general. Well, side-scrolling action games. Or if you're just looking for a challenge, because it is a fairly difficult game. Overall, I'm going to give Odin Sphere a 7.5 out of 10. The gameplay brings it down quite a few notches, but the other aspects of the game help counterbalance it a little bit, but at the end of the day, the gameplay is the most important part, so it's kind of the one part you don't want to mess up. But it's still an enjoyable gameplay. It's not broken or anything like that. Just repetitive. And I think a 7.5 out of 10 is a decent score for the game. And I certainly enjoyed the Let's Play thoroughly. And I hope you did too. And I will be moving on to Persona 3, The Journey. The FES version of the game. I don't know exactly when that's going to be the case, or when it's going to start, because, well, I'm getting a hog from my fiance, HD PVR, and I'm going to want to mess with some settings with it, do some testing with it, and on top of which, at some point I'm going to be moving. And I don't know when that's going to be. That's going to interfere with with videos, obviously. But I do hope you stick with me and join me for Persona 3. I did a lot of testing for it. I think it's going to be an excellent Let's Play. And I'll leave it off here. This is Ryzen. Thanks for watching this review. And I hope you join me for my future Let's Play projects. And I hope everybody had a happy holiday season and to an excellent new year.